Recovered alcoholic, my name's Pat Rogan. And thanks to the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous outlined in this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the program of AA, I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I can't even express to you how grateful I am for AA and this fellowship. AA didn't just save my life, but it gave me a new life. And this new life is just incredible. And I got to tell you, last week I left here and I played softball on Friday and tore my hamstring. So this is the first day I've been walking around really without any kind of pain. So it's good to be here though. So last week we touched on how I came to find out what it meant to be powerless in this program. As I said last week, that I spent my first 3 months in this program dying a slow death from just not drinking and going to meetings. I mean, that's kind of all I heard was meeting makers make it. Just don't pick up the first one. And my reprieve ran out at about 90 days. And I told everybody off at the meeting. And if this don't work, this is some kind of cult. That somebody hugs me again, I'm going to punch them. And I don't know why you guys are talking about a life beyond your wildest dreams. You're in AA. And I left that meeting, and Brian H. approached me with this book in his hand and said, do you want to know about the program? I said, I've been coming for 3 months. And he said, no, you've been visiting the fellowship. He said, let me tell you what the program is. And we sat in his car, and he read the doctor's opinion to me. And what I learned was that I suffered from an illness. I thought I was crazy. Did anybody else think they were crazy when they got here? I mean, who gives up families? Who gives up careers? Who gives up children? Who gives up their freedom unless you're freaking crazy, right? Well, you can be sick. You can be sick. And I was relieved to find out I was an alcoholic. So relieved that I called my ex-wife and said, I got good news. I said, I'm an alcoholic. I know what the problem is now. And she said, no, you're an asshole. Who drinks a lot. And she hung up the phone. And my sponsor confirmed that. And what I found out is that we have this twofold illness. Later we talk about the spiritual aspect of the illness, but the doctor talks about this twofold illness, this obsession of the mind and this allergy of the body. This idea that overcomes all other ideas to the contrary. This idea that allows me to believe that this time it's going to be different. This time it's going to be okay. This time I'm going to control it. And once I fall prey to that obsession, I pick up that first drink and I suffer from this physical craving that takes place once I put a substance in my body. And they describe my life in the doctor's opinion. Restless, irritable, discontent. Fearful. Tormented. Call it whatever you want. I like the word torment. I got that from Eric Clapton. That's what he called it. Tormented. And then there's this ease and comfort that comes at the third or fourth drink, right? That, and then boom, off to the races, right? And then the remorse. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I know I promised you. Yeah, Your Honor, I told you you'd never see me again. I know. The halfway house. Yeah, I know I tested dirty. I know. I'll be back next Friday, not a problem. And then I would repeat the same over and over and over. I usually would make it about 3 days before I would fall prey, till that emotional barometer that Charlie always talked about, that emotional level that would get to a point where I just can't stand it anymore. And I will pay the price tomorrow for relief today. One of my favorite paragraphs, I think it's on page 34, and more about alcoholism. We always talk about believing the lie. Well, that's not always true, is it? That's not always true. What about when we deliberately go out and get drunk, knowing what the consequences are going to be, right? Knowing that we're going to pay a price tomorrow. We talk about living one day at a time is something new to us. You go, you're going to jail. F that. I need help today. I need relief today, right? Our friends are telling us, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to jail. She's leaving you. You're going to lose your job. F it. F it. That's where I was. We say stuff like, you're going to jail. I don't care. I'm leaving your ass if you pick up a drink again. I don't care. We suffer from this twofold illness. By the way, the doctor's opinion is not the doctor's opinion anymore. It's fact. We are chemically different. Our bodies react differently. Chemically, our brain chemistry is different. I'm not going to do a Ben T on you, and go down with the amygdala and all that kind of stuff, the dopamine and the serotonin and all that kind of stuff. But we react differently. The non-alcoholic, the more they drink, the less they want. My brother says, hold on, man, I'm starting to feel it. Right? Stop, I'm going to be sick. Not the way I react. He goes to bed, I go to town. You know what I mean? Thank God there's a solution. Thank God there's a solution. And the solution's twofold, right? And the first part of this solution they talk about is the power of the fellowship. And I don't mean when I tell my story, and if you were here last week and you heard my story, I don't mean to discount the power in this fellowship, because without this fellowship, I'm not here. I'm not here. They did wrap their arm around me and took my ass to Denny's every freaking night. Fed me full of Grand Slams and French Slams and my moon ham over my hammies, whatever the hell they were called, and they fed me and bloated me and then sent my ass home, But it's not enough, But there's power here, and I don't know about you, but as soon as I walk into a room of AA, I get that third drink feeling, Like no matter what's going on out there, no matter how I walked into that meeting, there's this sense of safety. There's this sense of relief, and the power is here. Bill uses that Titanic analogy where, we all come from different places, the poor, the middle class, the rich, the wealthy, all the different religions, people who normally wouldn't mix, all come in here and they bond together because they have a common problem. Just like the people on the Titanic. When that Titanic hit that iceberg, nobody was asking for a financial statement at the railing, They had a common problem. They were on a sinking freaking ship. We need to come together and we need to get out of this predicament that we're in. This is the same thing here. The only difference is that on the Titanic, once they got to shore, they realized they didn't mix. They didn't need each other anymore, and they go their separate ways. But here, I am always dependent on you. Always. It's imperative that I work with the newcomer to maintain my sobriety. And it's imperative when the newcomer walks through that door that someone like me or you are there to greet them and put our arm around them and swap stories. And swap war stories. That's where our war story is valuable. That's where my story is valuable. To the newcomer who finally says, yeah, I felt like that. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, that happened to me. What did you do? How did you get out? That power of the fellowship is real. I was at my son belongs to South Point Church up in Jacksonville, and I love going up there with him. Pastor Russ is one of the people I love to listen to. It's a non-denominational Christian church up there. And two of the founders were in the church one of the weeks that Shannon and I were up there. Tony Baselli and Mark Rumel were two of the founders of the church. And if you don't know who they are, they're two Jacksonville Jaguar football players, a linebacker and a quarterback. And not that that's relevant, but they get my attention when they're football players. And they asked Tony Baselli what the most inspiring moment of founding that church was. And he says, meeting Mark Rumel. And he said, Mark and I became so close that no matter what was going on in my life, I could call Mark. He said, Mark would just look at me and go, okay, Tony, what's wrong? Let's go talk. I could call Tony or Mark in the middle of the night, and he would meet me wherever I needed to meet him and help me out. And they asked Mark the same thing, and Mark said, hey, Tony's my rock. No matter what I need, Tony's there. Anytime I need help, Tony's there. No matter what's going on in his life, he'll drop it, and he'll come and help me. He said, he's like he said, he looks at me, he can see it in my eyes that something's wrong. Who's your Tony Baselli? Who's your Mark Rumel? Find that person. Find that person that's chasing what you need, has what you want, and latch onto them. Billy G. Billy G was my guy. Billy had 2 years. I thought, oh my God, how do you get 2 years? That's incredible. He was like God to me. You guys that had 30, I didn't even believe you. I want nothing to do with you with 30 years, But if you had a year or two, man, holy crap, that's something, man. And I wanted to be where Billy was. I didn't want to know where there was a meeting. I wanted to know where Billy was going to a meeting. Because Billy had something, man. Billy had something I wanted. And Billy was chasing guys like Garrett and like Ben and like Zeke and like, those kind of guys. I could go on and on. I mean, so Dennis is one of them. They were chasing guys that they were on fire. They were on fire with this thing. Pastor Mike was one who was on fire. And I'm not saying all these guys stayed sober. But man, they were on fire with this thing at that time. They were carrying a message of depth and weight. It was amazing. And that's how, I didn't go to a meeting just to go to a meeting. I went to a meeting because I wanted to hear something that had depth and weight. When my guys tell me, what meeting go to? I think I'll just scroll down to the one-on-one. Who's speaking? I don't know. What kind of meeting is it? I don't know. What are you going there for? You going to have your paper signed or what? Well, it's right down the street. I don't want to go all the way up to Pompano. I go, what if you needed crack and you were going up to, how far have you gone for your drug of choice? How far have you gone for a drink? But now you're telling me it's inconvenient to get to the Pompano Beach group rather than the one-on-one club. Find your Tony Baselli, find your Mark Brumell, find your Billy G, and chase them, man. Find out where they go. That kept me in these rooms for that 3 months. That I was dry. The tremendous fact is that we found a common solution. The fellowship's here to support us, but it's not enough. I think this spiritual window that we come in here on that we call a pink cloud, I think we have this spiritual window. We have this period of time where we got this reprieve where we're open to this program of action, And I think if you don't grab that newcomer in that window, they're destined for relapse. To me, it becomes, how long can I hold my breath? I could hold my breath for about 3 months, and then I ran out, and then I couldn't do it anymore. I leaned on you for 3 months, and at 90 days, I couldn't do it anymore. I was at a place where I can't stand the way I feel for one more second, and I can't drink. I was in a hotel room before I got here saying, I can't stand the way I feel for one more second, and I can't stop drinking. That's a problem. When you can't live with or without alcohol. That's a turning point right there. Right? Can't live with it, can't live without it. Neither solution is working at this point. Thank God there is a solution. The tremendous fact is we have found a solution. That's the great news that this fellowship carries, that we have a way out. But it talks about whether you can quit, because our solution is spiritual. Let me just tell you that, right? The great fact, right, is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences that have revolutionized our whole outlook on life, right, and towards our fellows, right? The central fact of my life today is that God has entered my heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous and is commencing to do for me what I could not do for myself. What was that? I couldn't stay stopped. That's what I couldn't do. Now God has entered my heart and solved that problem. That's not great news for everybody. Well, why would I need that? Because the second fact says that I've lost the power of choice. I have lost the power. I can't bring into my consciousness with sufficient force the pain and suffering. The book says a week or a month ago. Bullshit. I couldn't remember the promise I made this morning. I left the house swearing I wouldn't pick up a drink. And I came home drunk or didn't come home for a couple of days. And I meant it with all my heart because I knew that my marriage and my children were on the line when I said, trust me, I'm not going to drink today. I meant it with my heart, and I'd share with you guys last week, promising a judge that he would never see me again. And I was drunk before I got home. Because I'm an emotional freaking cripple. That's why. Because I can't stand the torment. That restless, irritable discontent is just too much for me. By the way, I think I hope Tom's on there today. I stole this from Tom. Because we hear that God has entered our hearts and lives, and we hear hearts and lives. We hear it both ways, right? And I think that, and Tom, I stole it from Tom, that if they ever asked Bill, is it lives or lives, Bill would have said yes. Whatever you want it to be. I mean, I have an opinion that I'll speak to you after the meeting if you want to hear it, but I don't think it matters at this point. I don't think it matters at all. I think you have to get to a point where you're open to whatever solution we have to offer. I think it's on, 34? You can tell I'm really prepared here. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can stop on a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he's already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. So I'm assuming that everybody here has a desire to stop. I'm assuming that everybody that I sponsor desires to stop. And if you don't think you're powerless, our book says go try some controlled drinking. Go try to stop for a year, it says in the book, which that's just unheard of. I mean, that scratch that shit out right away. A year, holy crap. I couldn't stop for a week. No, I don't recommend that with anybody that uses any other type of drug. I love it more about alcoholism. It says that someday we'll find a pill to solve our problem. Science may someday accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. If they had a pill that would allow you to drink normally, how many of you are taking more than one? How many are crushing it? Smoking it? Cooking it? Yeah. They have no idea who they're dealing with, man. So there's this, and I gotta cover it because there's this asterisk. I'm not going to tell the joke because I got a bad review from the seminar telling that joke. There was one person out of 400 that didn't like it. So I'll never do it again. So I'll never do that again. It's true. All right. There's an asterisk that says, please read. Fully explained, it says on the bottom of that page. And in the first printing of the first edition, the Appendix 2 wasn't in it. Bill just was against it. Bill was so on fire with his experience that he had in Towns Hospital. That's all he wanted to talk about was that white light experience that he had in Towns Hospital, that conversion experience, transformational experience that he had. And he didn't want to discount any of that. Hank and Jim Burwell wanted to put the appendix in the very first printing. But after the printing goes out, the 3,400 books or whatever, they start getting all these phone calls like, why are we not having this spiritual experience that Bill had? No, we're not having this white light thing. And Bill agreed that it was time in the second printing of the first edition to put the Appendix 2 in the back. And it says the term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself in us in many different forms. We learned two things in the very first paragraph. That a spiritual experience is nothing more than a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening is nothing more than a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. And the other thing we learned that it can come quickly in a spiritual experience or slowly over a period of time in a spiritual awakening. Right? Both sufficient to recover from alcoholism. It is true in the first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences change must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals, change. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, change, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, change, followed by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, change, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experience are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, the friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference, change, long before he is himself. He finally realized he's undergone a profound alteration, change, in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. And so, if you sponsor people, you've seen that before they did, right? You see the change in their behavior, the change in their thinking, way before they see it, right? I had a guy I was sponsoring at one of the local fraction resorts down in Pompano, and we were doing this big meeting outside, and he comes up, Pat, I need to talk to you. And I said, what? He said, we got a new guy in last night, and he stole my food. And I said, man, that's awesome. He said, no, maybe you didn't hear me. He said, the guy, got a new guy in the house last night. He stole my food. And I said, man, you're the best, I guess if he thought he said it louder and slower, that I would understand what he was trying to say. You don't understand, he said. Newcomer stole the middle shelf is mine. My food's on the middle shelf. He took and ate my food. I said, man, you are amazing. Right? And he walked away shaking his head. And I know he's thinking, I got the wrong guy. I got to get another sponsor. This guy's not even listening to me, right? About 3 weeks later, he comes back to me. He says, hey, got a new guy in the house last night. I said, oh boy. He says, yeah, I fed him. Good job. What's the difference? What's the difference? Perception. Perception. Right? And you get a lot of times, not so much in this room, but probably some in this room. There's probably some people in this room that can't believe they have to sit here and listen to me for a freaking hour. I can't believe I got to listen to this BS for an hour. They court ordered my ass in here. I'm here with the bus. This is just bullshit, And then there's another half that think, my God, we're so blessed to be able to come to an AA meeting and intermingle with this fellowship and listen to somebody talk about the steps, And you're both in the same place, in the same seats, listening to the same person. And it's just a difference in perception. You just perceive it differently. So with a few exceptions, our members find they've tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. More religious members call it God consciousness. Change, change, change. More emphatically, wish to say that any alcoholic capable of facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, change, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial, not changing. That's the only thing that will defeat you here, is hanging on to your old ideas. We read it in How It Works. We've got to let go. Got to let go of my thinking and open up my mind for some new information. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. Notice the words are different order. It's more of a who than how, right? There's a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. And we know that was William Paley, not Herbert Spencer now. Personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. That's our solution. And they asked us a couple more times for amplification. It's on another page. And then please read on page 47. Whether you can quit on a non-spiritual basis. There's the key, I love the way the book talks about 3 different types of drinkers in that chapter. It talks about my brother, the guy who can take it or leave it alone. But it talks about the other guy or gal that's just like the real deal, right? Who drinks, the heavy drinker, the hard drinker, the one that sits with us, beside us when we're drinking, when we're on our runs. But they were able to stop or moderate. My buddy Jimmy D, we were getting drunk together at a very young age up in Pittsburgh. And I moved down to South Florida, and then a couple years later, Jimmy moved down to South Florida, and we ran down here too. And Jimmy drank and drug just like me, just with me. We ran together for a couple of years. Right? Jimmy got married. Jimmy had a kid. I had a kid. Jimmy and I were going to this biker bar in Margate one night. I'm not sure why. Neither one of us had a bike. You know, them nights where you're just looking for some action, you know, looking to get your ass kicked or something, you know. And so we're in this bar, and Jimmy gets a call from his wife. And she said, if you don't come home now, I'm leaving you. And Jimmy went home. That sissy went home. I never saw Jimmy again. Now, I know Jimmy had to shake, rattle, and roll. I know. I don't even know if he went to detox or not, but I'll tell you what, he drank and drug just like I did. But he was given a sufficient reason, and he stopped. He went home. He stopped running. That was like, I had to be 37, 38 years ago. Jimmy's like 3 kids, still married to the same person. I'm on my 3rd marriage. Nobody tells me what to do. You know? I'm a grown-ass man, you know? Jimmy was given good reason, right? Ill health. You're going to die young. Your liver's failing. Your stomach's burning up. Given good reason, the non-alcoholic will stop or moderate. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I'm beyond human aid. I have placed myself beyond human aid. The facts, the tremendous fact, the central fact, the great fact, you know, and I need that spiritual experience to be able to recover from this illness. The chapter, I think We Agnostics is probably the best chapter that I've ever read. Probably the most, man, I don't know what inspired him to write that chapter, but that changed everything for me. Everything for me. I'm going to tell you my religious background. I was raised Catholic, right? So here's what I heard when I was a child. That if you follow the rules, you're going to go to the gates of hell. And if you don't follow the rules, you're going to go to the fire, right? And there was this halfway house called purgatory, you know, that the Catholics had. I'm not sure how you got to go to purgatory and not heaven or hell. I guess if you weren't bad enough to get burnt or good enough to go to heaven, you went to halfway, you know? And I wasn't capable of following. I was the little kid in grade school who lied in confession, right? I mean, because I wanted to be the norm. You know, I would take a poll. I'd ask the kids, what are you going to, how many times did you lie? You know, did you steal anything? And I would just get this, you know, consensus of what the crowd was, and I would go in and tell them whatever they were going to say. I just wanted to be part of the group, you know. I would leave confession with guilt. I just lied to the freaking priest. And when my grandmother stopped forcing me to go to church, I was done with the fairy tale. That's the way I saw it. This is some kind of disciplinary trick. This is like Santa Claus, you know, and it's just BS, right? No, the real truth is I'm incapable of following rules, and there's a lot of stuff on this fun side of the island that doesn't line up with these rules, so I'm going to go to the fun side of the island, and I'm going to play over there, you know, and just deny all of that, you know. But the truth is, there was something called a conscience. You know, there's this thing deep down within every one of us that is gone. You know? And I just denied it for years. And when I got here, that was still my conception. And I think it was genius. And by the way, Bill says half of us get here either agnostic or atheist. Half of us get here either agnostic or atheist. And that's not an obstacle. That is not an obstacle. Right? And I believe I was an agnostic. I just had no knowledge. I had no knowledge of it. It wasn't that I disbelieved or believed. You know, I just had no knowledge of God. That's all agnostic means. The atheist believes in the proof of the non-existence of God. That may be a problem. Yeah. And that's why this fellowship is sufficient at the beginning. Just lean on us, right? Lean on us. The book is asking me to lay aside everything I think I know for a new information. Take some new information. Everything I know, John Williams, you say, everything you know is killing you when you get here. It's what you don't know that's going to save your life. So lay aside everything you think you know for some new ideas. Wow, what a new idea that was, right? Why don't you choose your own conception of God? By the way, it doesn't say create. It says choose. And there's a power in this fellowship. There is a power here. They're asking me, the agnostic, to go from willing to believe to coming to believe. They're asking the atheist to go from no to maybe. That's all. No to maybe. Maybe. Well, why is it? Well, here's your choice. Go on to the bitter end or accept spiritual help. Die an alcoholic death or accept spiritual help. And if you're not convinced, your misery can be refunded. Try it on your own and come back and tell us whether you can or not. I don't suggest that. I don't tell any of my sponsees to do that. But let me tell you something. Being convinced is a requirement for recovery. It's a requirement. They're going to ask us in step 3. They're going to ask, right before step 3, they're going to ask, are you convinced? What are you convinced of? The first 2. That's a requirement. That's something Bill got from William James. William James says there's 2 requirements for a spiritual experience: facing an insurmountable obstacle, facing defeat, and seeking a solution through a power greater than human power, through a deity, he said. That's a requirement. But I get to choose my own conception of God. And somebody asked me that question, what would you want? See, I had this punishing God. By the way, I don't hear that today. I don't know what I was listening to when I was a child. I don't know. I don't know if that's what I heard or if that's what I think I heard. I don't know. But I don't hear that today when I'm at church. That's not the way I hear it. I heard it a different way when I was younger. Maybe they've changed. Maybe I've changed. Probably me. Probably my perception of what's going on. Yeah. I chose a God of love, a God of forgiveness, and a God of mercy. That's what I wanted my God to be. And it was just a starting point for me. I had no knowledge of God. But for now, I'm going to say God is love, God is forgiveness, God is mercy. And I'm going to roll with that. And it's saying on that cornerstone, we can build the structure that's going to move us forward. On that grain of sand, that little bit of willingness to believe is enough to move forward. Because we don't have to have faith in anything from the start. We don't have to actually believe in anything. We just have to be willing to believe that we are not the power, that we do not have the power. Just move off. Just take a step off of no to maybe. And then from there, you'll start to get results. From there, you'll make a decision. Then you'll take some action. And then you're going to see some damn results. And then you're going to come to believe. That's how this thing works. But just willing to believe is all it takes. There's no belief requirement here. Not when you're new. At some point, if you do this work, if you incorporate these steps into your life, if you work these steps, things are going to change. You're going to change. You are going to change. Your perception is going to change. There's no doubt about it. I was told that, I was Dr. Bob when I got here. That's why I suffered 3 months in this program, right? One thing Bill learned with Dr. Bob was what order to have the steps in, right? We know for Bill for 6 months was selling the spiritual experience, right? Bill Wilson was going out there talking about his white light experience. And people weren't, 90 some he tried, nobody got sober. And he starts complaining to Silkworth about it. And Silkworth says, yeah, I hear what you're doing out there. Selling this spiritual experience. Bill, yes, that's vital. But tell them the problem first. Tell them the hopelessness of the illness first. Tell them about the obsession. Tell them about the allergy. Tell them that first. Get their heads going up and down first, and then give them your other medicine, right? And Bill took heed to that suggestion. First one he tries it on is Dr. Bob. Well, I was second stepped. I came into the 5th Chapter Club. Probably Dennis is the only one that remembers it. Anybody else remember the 5th Chapter Club? Yeah, I know you guys do. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I come into the 5th Chapter Club. John, do you remember John, the bartender? Camper John, we called him. Camper John, we called him that because he had a camper behind Denny's. And he used to live in that camper. And Camper John, he was the bartender. The 5th Chapter was really cool because it had a fellowship room and it had the meeting room. So if you didn't want to hear the fellowship, you could go into the meeting room, play chess or checkers, or tell lies, sponsor people if you wanted to, be sponsored. And John was the coffee guy. He was the bartender. And John looked at me and said, dude, you don't look good. I said, no, I don't feel too good, John. I was detoxing. And John says, man, you need to start praying. I go, okay. He says, yeah, you need to get up in the morning, ask God to keep you sober that day. And then you need to thank him at night. I go, okay, John. And I start to walk away and he goes, wait. You're not going to make it through the day. He said, you need to go through the hour. You know, and I took heed to that. I was doing a job down in South Miami, opening up an appliance store. And I was dropping to my knees like at 10 o'clock and then dropping to my knees again at 11, going into the bathroom and getting on the bathroom floor, please, God. And I started putting some days together and I started getting through the detox and I started feeling a little bit better. And I thought, maybe there's something to this prayer thing. So I go to the jewelry store. There's a jewelry store next door. It might have been a pawn shop. I'm not sure. They buzz me in and I go, I need a cross. And he says, do you want a crucifix? I said, I'm not going that far. Yeah. Just give me a cross, right? And I don't know what made me do that, except that I was getting results praying. And so what am I praying to? And I still have it, by the way. I lost it twice. I lost it in my yard once and found it again. Lost it at a customer's house. She called me and gave it back to me. I'm just supposed to have it. Just reminds me of where my reliance is when I get up in the morning and look in the mirror. You know, but I thought it was going to do something magical. I don't know. You know. But it got me 90 days. John got me 90 days. I started to believe that there was something in that prayer, but I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't know what it meant to be powerless over alcohol until Brian approached me at 90 days. So I was Dr. Bob in it. Dr. Bob did it for 2.5 years. And until Bill came to him and told him what the problem was, the obsession of the mind, the allergy of the body, and told his story to Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob says he's the first one that knew what he was talking about when it came to alcoholism. And it came from experience. It didn't come from a book. Bob got it because he had both pieces of the puzzle finally. So, you know, is this all about God? Or is this all about not drinking? It's about both. It's just which camp to take them to first, right? I think we're out of time, right? Thanks for letting me be here.